So I just saw the actual full trailer for Interview with the Vampire by AMC, which allegedly is based on the Anne Rice books. And what did I think? Well, it was mostly pretty stupid. If you are a book purist, this is definitely not going to be for you. They really changed almost everything critical to the mythology. So it's not much to say in terms of book purity. But even judging it by its own grounds, it's kind of just meh or below meh. I mean, I recognize they have a limited budget, so they don't have the budget that Rings of Power does or even an MCU film does. So you got to be at least a little generous, but really, they didn't show very much or give you very much. It does seem to share a few plot points from Interview with the Vampire, the book. That's about it. I mean, yes, there's a journalist that Louis talks to, and yes, he's a man of wealth and stature, and yes, they do adopt Claudia, and yes, Lestat, quote, makes him. That's really it. They just took the basic plot points and radically altered everything. They even radically altered a key aspect because it seems like here vampires have sex and enjoy sex. Now, I want to warn people there is a lot of sex in the Anne Rice books, but the vampires don't have sex. The way I understood it is that the act of murder, killing, and just draining someone is a way more intense experience. So they don't even have, again, sex isn't really a big part of their lives because aside from biologically they may not be able to do it. That's one big problem. But another problem is it's just not as intense as the act of, quote, killing or hunting. They seem to be violating that as well. The dialogue is fairly cringy. The sets look okay and the costumes look fairly well done. It's kind of a big secret in Hollywood, if you really know the film industry and television industry, that New Orleans gives a lot of tax incentives to do a production there. So I imagine that's really what's going on. They just wanted access to these tax incentives, and that's why they're doing it, and they're reframing the story. Was it necessary to blackwash Louis or insert all these black characters? Probably not. I mean, in New Orleans, it does make sense, so at least the setting is somewhat coherent. Some people will say it's doubtful Louis would be like this. No, it is possible for a man of color at this time period, but that's the whole point. Everything has been switched. They've completely changed the characters. It's a whole new setting. It seems it's even following a kind of different plot because, yes, Lestat and Louis fall off, and yes, they do have a kind of rivalry and a kind of hatred towards one another, but it's much more subtle and philosophical in the books. In the movie, it's much more emotive. Like Louis just feels very melancholic. He feels very torn about being a vampire. Here, it seems he's enjoying becoming a vampire, which does not make any sense. He's supposed to be very, very emotively torn up about what's happening to him. But apparently, in some scenes, he actually enjoys killing people, so it's not making a whole lot of sense. So, from a book standpoint, and even from an adaptation standpoint, allowing some generosity, it does look like a complete mess. The only thing I think is being fair to them is the Claudia story is unclear. They've changed her too. That's a kind of blackwashing as well, but maybe that part of the story is going to be coherent. If so, maybe it's going to be passable, but at this point, it looks pretty lousy and silly. But to maintain consistency, I sometimes do like the MCU, even if it doesn't match the comic books. I like the Snyder Cut, even though it doesn't match the comic books. And I like Rings of Power, although clearly they're taking some liberties from the books. But those things do give you something in the trade off. You have a kind of visual splendor, a kind of interesting style, especially with Sam Raimi with Multiverse of Madness mixing horror and comedy. So you get something back. And Rings of Power has, of course, these amazing sets and just incredibly well done visual shots. I'm not sure what we're getting in the trade off here. It just doesn't feel like we're going to get anything to compensate for losing fidelity or even losing the seriousness of the 1994 film, which is far superior to this. And I would say, to be honest, I do like Anne Rice's books, but I don't consider her the greatest author in the universe. So I consider the movie adaptation by Neil Jordan to be slightly stronger than the book, but at least both are trying to be semi serious. There is a lot of comedy, yes, but this is still taken in a very serious light, whether theological, philosophical, or emotive. This just feels like really superficial, flashy trash, and it's just being made for a very young audience that grew up with Buffy and Angel and is kind of merging the Joss Whedon mythology with the Anne Rice mythology. But the thing is, explicitly in the Whedon mythology, yes, Buffy can have sex with Angel. Buffy can have sex with Spike. Vampires don't really have sex in the way they're portraying, so it's not making any sense with the mythology. So it does have the label of Anne Rice, but it really has nothing to do with Anne Rice. But maybe the story onto itself is okay, but so far I'm not getting reassuring signs. The music is weak, the sets are okay, the acting is laughable. I think Jacob Anderson is capable of being a good actor, but these monologues are beyond silly, and none of this dialogue matches the books as far as I remember, so it's all kinds of silliness and stupidity. I guess you can consider this woke trash, but this just really seems very below average, flashy Hollywood nonsense. That's just using the brand name of a dead author, and that's about it. But I will investigate further, but at this point, maybe I will review it, maybe I will not review it. I don't feel any need that I want to look at this thing. And if you think I'm a bigot or whatever, I mean, for instance, the queer element, which is very prominent in this, that is in the book. So if you do have a problem with, quote, a gay vampire. Well, that is canonical. So that part at least is canonical. And that is about it. Not much else to look at or talk about, unfortunately.